Welcome to Life Unrestricted.
This is your show if you're sick of living a life controlled by food and exercise rules, and if you're ready to learn how to accept yourself and enjoy the heck out of life. My gig is about body image, femininity, self-worth, and resilience. Come on, let's walk side by side as we slowly step out of restriction misery and unlock our true selves.
Your host, Merritt Boxler, is a former national radio DJ, freelance journalist, speaker, and writer with a passion to make women feel good in their bodies. This is a show brought to you live from Switzerland.
Hi, lovely radicals. How are you? You're goddamn amazing. You're the best listeners ever. You know that? The way you engage in our community on Facebook, the willingness to actually make a difference by jumping through all the silly iTunes hoops to write a 5-star review for this podcast, and by deciding to be a total champion and join the ranks of my lovely supporters on Patreon. This is how this show survives, ladies and gentlemen. And by you contributing, you're not just showing me love and respect for my effort to actually produce this show for you, but you're also showing a lot of love to women and men who are in need of this and who are finding this podcast because you rated it, you reviewed it, and because this show can only be sustainable with your support. So you're really helping all of us, and this deserves a huge, loving wave of thank yous from really all of us. This week, let's hear it for Laura Jane, Mindy, and Diana. Aren't you just the greatest champs? I mean, really, wow, thank you so much. Laura Jane, Mindy, and Diana are my newest supporters on patreon.com, the platform that I use to keep the show going, thanks to people like you. Are you, dear listener, interested in becoming one of my champs too? Well, then go have a look at my page on patreon.com/lifeunrestricted. And thank you in advance, badass. And for those who are just willing to commit to writing a review on iTunes, here's how it actually works. The thing is, you have to go via the search bar on your phone or computer and actually search for a Life Unrestricted, even though it might be right there already or that you're already subscribed. You have to enter Life Unrestricted to the search bar, and then you can click on the big show image. And then from there, you get a selection of tabs, one of which being the ratings and reviews tab. That's where you can go and leave some nice words and a handful of stars. And thank you all for doing this. You know what, radicals? The more I think about it, the more I realize that it's mostly shame that is keeping us from bringing our full, magnificent, and magnificently flawed self to the world. It's often just this fear of, what will other people think? Or what if they hate me? Or what if I'm not considered cool anymore? You know, this deep nagging conviction that we have stowed away somewhere inside of us that we're not good enough, somehow defective, and that we have to put on a mask or, go to extra effort to prove that we're worthy. I mean, it doesn't make much sense when I say it out loud like this, but Jesus, there's so much in life that I'm afraid of. Some stuff even that I can't actually pinpoint, just this nebulous, fearful attitude inside of me. And that's what sucks, because I can see how easy I can get stuck and fall back into my own fear thinking, my gremlin thinking. And crazy to see how often this still revolves around me being seen in the world, actually in my physical self, insecurities about my body. Which is annoying because it totally feeds into my disordered ways with food and exercise. And I ask myself, why is it so hard to just let go now that we know so much? Of course, we can acknowledge that there are haters out there, no doubt, but really, what can haters do if you stand on solid ground? Nothing. Just proving to you how biased they are, how unloved they feel themselves, and how full of their own issues they are. When we boil it down, it really doesn't mean much more than someone who might be idolizing us when we lose weight or idolizing us when we, quote, look pretty. It doesn't mean much more, even when it comes as a compliment. It shows us much more about the person giving the compliment than about us. Because it's all totally relative and it's subjective. It means nothing. It really only shows us the values of the person who is making the comment. And because we are often insecure ourselves, we hold on to every morsel of positive feedback we can get. And this can lead into dangerous rabbit holes of always wanting to please others, of becoming obsessed with weight and shape or productivity and output and looks. And so we often end up creating false identities. Someone might become, quote, the fit chick. Others become, quote, the healthy eater. Others become, quote, the perfect housewife or the marathoner. Imagine how this sense of identity suddenly becomes not just a way for us to getting reassurance or approval by those who happen to like what we do, which could be randomly exchanged for other people if we chose to do something else, of course. But when we're stuck in this identity, we don't see that and fear that we could lose our social standing if we changed our ways. And so imagine how this suddenly isn't just a cool self-esteem boost as it might have been at the outset of us slipping into this identity. Suddenly it becomes a prison, right? A thing we think we have to do. Because after all those people who have complimented us, what would happen if we didn't keep delivering? And heaven forbid if we slipped out of this role entirely and loosened the shackles. Interestingly, all the people that ever went through a transformation, which was often brought about by a lot of pain, as we know, this point of hitting rock bottom, and a point when people realize they just can't go on the way they had. Those people usually report that after shedding their false identity that felt so confining and limiting because it always had to be outwardly, quote, perfect, say the identity of being the fit chick or the always cheery one, that they felt tremendous relief. And they all found that losing the people that only liked them or gave them likes because of their false identity, losing them didn't really hurt because they never felt authentically seen and therefore safe around those people and felt like a fake anyway. And B, because finally living true to their own values meant that they were no longer abandoning themselves. And how liberating that feels. And how it is actually also liberating them from trying to get outside approval because they feel safe inside themselves because they live according to their values. And C, because when they started to become more true to themselves and really show up, when they let go of the crutches that they only used because they wrongly assumed that they weren't lovable the way they were originally, after that, they were finally able to be found by those people, the real friends, the people who actually did love them for who they are. It makes so much sense because how can our people find us if we are still hiding behind a compulsive identity and not showing our real selves? They can't. When we are fake, how can we expect to find anything but fake friends? And oh man, there's nothing more lonely and empty than being surrounded by people who you don't really connect to. No amount of fake friends will ever fill that hole in our soul that we only created because we picked up the belief that we weren't good enough. Have you ever noticed how many people say, "I'm fine," when you ask them how they're doing, and you just know that they're not really doing fine? Isn't this disconcerting and sad? I mean, I'm not saying we should all offer our innermost struggles to everyone that's asking, but there's a difference. There's nuance, right? There's something about this "I'm totally fine" lie that I think shows a lot of what's wrong with society today. And I'm a person that feels deeply, whether I want to or not, by the way, which I often don't want to be honest, but there's not much to negotiate, so I just do. Anyway, I mostly feel whether or not the person I'm talking to is being authentic to me and real, or if he or she is simply presenting a mask. And I don't know about you, but when I feel this disconnection, I can't help but feel lonely. Like I ask myself, could it be that this person doesn't trust me enough to show their real selves? Or does this person think that I can't see through that sorry performance? Why is there so much pretense? Everybody seems to be fine with that. And it's sort of our cultural behavior pattern, but I don't really deal with this well. I feel unseen and empty in this sort of environment. I feel much, 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 much better and much more stimulated and much more compassionate. Well, I feel much more myself when I'm with someone that I feel an honest connection to. Someone that makes any sort of psychological armor unnecessary. Someone that shares their strengths and weaknesses with me. Someone I can share my strength and my weaknesses with without it having to be weird or out of the ordinary even, because we are all humans. Imagining a world like this, I mean, that would totally be my preferred, ordinary, common, default mode. Just telling it like it is. And I realized that, sadly, this is not how civilization works, apparently. This civilization is full of demons and dragons that no one seems to want to acknowledge or address. And by demons and dragons, I mean people's troubles and issues and anxieties, emotions, worries, compulsions, addictions, darker thoughts. All of this stuff this world wants to push out of the picture, and present the Disney sort of picture. Boring. But it's really weird because no matter how obvious it's getting, with the steady increase of mental illnesses of all sorts, depression, anxiety, addictions, compulsions, as I said, no matter how many more people are being prescribed psych meds or sleeping pills or stimulants, the world we see around us still seems to think that this pretense thing is working, which fries my brain, to be honest, because it obviously isn't. And maybe I'm just feeling too much, maybe I'm the canary in the coal mine, but honestly, this relentless promotion of positive thinking and the overemphasis on everybody having to be happy all the time, this is really undermining our collective well-being. Because we all know how we feel. And the more this elusive concept of eternal happiness is being sold to us, the worse we feel, because reality simply doesn't match the promise. So what ends up happening? We end up clinging to everything. We end up clinging to diets, to romance promises, to promotions, to alcohol, to superfoods, anything that is, connected to a promise that this will bring happiness. Anything to bring that happiness carrot that is dangling in front of our noses closer to our mouths. Funnily enough, this never works, does it? So let's dismantle this illogic of this happiness fairy tale. This ever-present need for positivity, and that goes for body positivity too. The perceived imperative to always feel good about ourselves. It reeks of perfectionism all over again. And it's a pervasive narrative, for sure, but an unattainable goal once again. And once more, the self-blame comes with the package, doesn't it? Because if we cannot attain the state of bliss that we think others have, hint, they don't. If we can't achieve this, then obviously we must have done something wrong. We must have missed the clue. It's our fault. But no, it's diet mentality in yet another cloak. That's all. So this line of thinking, the idea that all we have to do is think positively and avoid negative emotions at all costs, it isn't just not beneficial to our well-being, it is also delusional and it's downright harmful. What it means to be fully alive, to be fully human, means allowing oneself to feel the full spectrum of emotions that are inherent in a human being and very important for a person's growth. There's no such thing as just happy. Just as there's no such thing as just sunshine. We wouldn't recognize a beautiful sunny day if there were only beautiful sunny days. It's the contrast that makes us appreciate one particular thing. So forcing oneself to live in positivity around the clock is not positive. It creates a muted existence that lacks vibrancy and expression. So when you're happy, sure, go right ahead and feel it with every fiber of your being. But when you're angry, feel that too and use it to help you set your boundaries. When you're sad or grieving, by all means, allow yourself to weep. That's how we clear our soul and get ready for new horizons. Feeling it all. As hard as it might be sometimes, and it is. It is the path to becoming fully alive, I believe. There's no spiritual bypassing that's ever going to lead us there. And now to the elephant in the room today. Why the heck is this episode so short? You might be wondering. Or you might even be thinking, thank God this one is shorter. Who knows? But there obviously is a reason for the shortness of this episode, and it has a lot to do with me and my own anxieties and my tiredness. Because as I've been churning out episodes like a Swiss clockwork, I've slipped into gremlin thinking again. Really came out of a blind spot. I wasn't noticing it much, but thoughts like, there has to be a full episode every week, or I have to release an interview every week, or I have to keep this insane amount of work, buying the books, preparing the interviews, doing the shows, editing, producing, distributing. I have to keep this schedule up. People have come to depend on this, and there are thousands of listeners, and the audience is growing. I cannot let go of the reins. What would happen? Better not slack here, Merit. And so I've put a lot of pressure on myself. And frankly, I've ignored how negatively this has begun to impact me. I am or was constantly reading for the next interview while at the same time editing the interview that I had just done, while at the same time doing an actual interview of the week and preparing for the upcoming episodes, inviting people, and at the same time producing, distributing the episodes of the week. Even just saying all that is exhausting, right? And that's basically been the last year for me, because I just loved doing it so much that I conveniently ignored the part of me that was also, starting to feel tired. And so because I love this podcast and doing it, I really didn't want to admit that it's becoming a bit much every week without a break ever. But you probably know how it is, right? We don't want to appear weak or inconsistent. No. And so it totally felt out of the question for me to basically just be a human being and say, hey, wait a minute. Why is it not okay if I'm not done editing the interview that's supposed to go live this week? Why is this not okay? Why is it not okay to cancel an interview when I'm tired? Why? Who says that all of my episodes need to be interviews? Who says that my episodes need to be a certain length? Where did this rule pop up all of a sudden in my mind that I have to work harder to be accepted or respected than other people? What a load of BS is this? Oh, hello, Gremlin. You totally got me again. You really got me believing it again, that I need to prove my worth, like constantly. So you see, lovely radicals, my inner gremlin is never shutting up. And for a long time, I really didn't see it for what it was, the gremlin. I thought it was just the truth, again. And so I had to start clearing my head from all of this clutter that kept clouding my view. And I could see, hey, no one is actually expecting all of this of me. And while we're checking facts, hey, other podcasts are shorter and longer at times. Other podcasts are irregular. Other podcasts aren't always churning out interviews. Does that make them any less great? No way, not at all. So I realized that, wow, all of these crazy standards that I'm holding myself up against are nothing but my gremlin's rules, no one else's. Why do there have to be other, stricter rules for myself as there are for any other human being? What am I believing here? That I have to be perfect in order to be respected? You know, that's totally gremlin speak. And I'm being as specific with you because I want you to see that maybe you have certain thoughts like this as well, related to stuff that you do in your life. And really, it takes a while to recognize the gremlin because this sucker is pretty goddamn amazing at making us believe that what he says is true and that there need to be stricter rules for ourselves than there are for other people. And it's not true. We don't need to be perfect in order to get respected. It is gremlin speak. So you know what I did this week to kick these gremlin thoughts to the curb? Well, I didn't edit, as I thought I should have, my interview that I wanted to put out this week because I felt too tired. And I canceled an interview I had planned because really I felt too tired. And I listened to that feeling instead of the anxiety I feel when I listen to my inner gremlin that accuses me, of course, of being a lazy slacker. And very importantly for you to see, I'm not only doing this to try to combat my perfectionistic, merciless gremlin voice, but also very much so that you have proof too. There is no need for you to always be at everyone's service. There is no need for you to always be productive as hell. There is no need for you to always appear all put together. Not at all. We're going to practice this, radicals. For me, this meant, as I indicated, canceling this week's interview that had been planned for a long time, and it was pretty fucking hard because it was actually Susie Orbach, no less, that I canceled. The brilliant author who wrote Fat is a Feminist Issue, among many other books, and I had been trying to get her on the show for so long, so it felt really, really wrong for me to cancel. But really, what good of an interviewer would I be if I just powered on through for the sake of being able to bring you an interview that I actually felt too tired to conduct? I would have been A, rejecting myself and my need for a week off, at least, and B, I would have been disrespectful of Susie Orbach's time too. Because I think I can only really connect to someone when I'm really excited to engage with that person. And that's true for all of us, really. And this week, I think nobody would have been, quote, important enough for me to get excited because I really feel burned out at this moment in time. And I can't be of much service if I'm burned out, right? And it's important to realize that the inner gremlin doesn't care about all this. The inner gremlin just shouts over that tired little human inside of us that is pleading for rest, right? The inner gremlin just yells over that. hollering at us that we have, quote, a responsibility to always be on, to get our shit together and to not show weakness. Well, if I learned anything this past year, it is that this is complete and utter horseshit. Everybody has a right to listen to their own needs, and should too, in fact, listen to their own needs, as hard as it can be sometimes, because we cannot pour from an empty cup. We can't be of service when we feel like we're hanging on by our fingernails. That only leads to us pretending and putting on this fake onness and secretly breeding resentment. That's a lose-lose situation. We can't pretend to give when we are in need ourselves, nor should we. So as I said, in my case, this meant biting the bullet, canceling Susie Orbach, which admittedly was uncomfortable to do. And it also meant that even though I have a backlog of several recorded interviews, I want you to know that I'm showing you what's happening in real time, and that means not releasing an interview because I'm not done editing. Just to show my inner gremlin that no one is expecting this crazy uber performance on my part anyway. And if I just let this week be what it is, a shitty week, I can maybe, hopefully make you see that, hey, slacking can be a badass thing. Letting yourself off the hook, letting yourself rest, letting yourself feel what you feel, seeing that you are of no use to the world if you tell yourself you have to be going all the time. That can be the very thing that is healing. Because you are not a battery bunny or a robot. You're a human being. And isn't that what makes a human being so great to be around? It certainly isn't their perfectionism. I mean, totally uber perfectionistic people are mostly, an annoyance. It's really a person's humanness that makes them relatable and lovely and lovable. It's their innate, if you wish, perfect imperfection. It's the imperfection that really makes us love people, right? But we get tricked by our inner gremlin that tells us otherwise. And of course the inner gremlin does that, especially now that we live in a world that shows us impossible ideals on a minutely basis and encourages us to compare ourselves to them. In a world that basically breeds insecurities, worries, and internal pressure, of course the inner gremlin picks up on all that, and that's going to be what we are thinking. So I think we can all use some breathing room. And we need to give ourselves this breathing room. The world is not giving it to us. We need to give it to ourselves. To keep our own sanity, really. So I'm giving myself some breathing room. Are you too? And I think in the meantime, I'm going to listen to episode 23 of my own podcast, when I told you about how to become a critical consumer and make better resolutions. I vaguely remember giving a huge list of permission slips, and I think I can use them myself this week. And if anyone wants to join me on re-listening to episode 23, please go ahead. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again around here next week. And you're going to hear a real badass of a woman who did an extremely badass thing in a public place. And yes, that's a teaser. Love you. Take care.
This was today's dose of badassery from Life Unrestricted. Find the show notes with links to everything we mentioned in this episode over at lifeunrestricted.org. And if this show is making you feel good, awesome, make sure to subscribe and please let others feel good too. By leaving a 5-star review on iTunes, you'll help make this show more visible and therefore more accessible for others. You're the best. Thanks.